Hey guys, welcome to the Golf Podcast Live with Raf and Mike. This is episode number 73. I'm your host, Rafael Kalamat. I'm in Oakville, Ontario, Canada, alongside Michael Bleackley, always. They call him Bleaks at ECS Agency. I'm really excited today, guys. With us today to discuss the world of golf is World Teachers Golf Hall of Famer, two-time Washington State Junior Champion, University of Houston All-American, professional golfer, and author of 18 books. I don't know if I'm right about that, but I think I counted 18, at least in my collection. And then he's also a golf analyst for CNBC for the PGA Tour Champions. We've had lots of those guys on. NBC and co-host of the School of Golf or Golf School on SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio, Mr. Jim McLean. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be with you, Mike and Rafael. I think it's 14 books, but I'll take 18.
Raph likes to embellish a little bit. So it looks like you dropped out for a sec, but he'll call back in. That's the beauty of doing this live. So, Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you started in golf?
Well, I grew up not too far from you in Seattle, Washington, and, played a lot of junior golf. And then I got a scholarship to the University of Houston, which had great teams during that era. I played with some great players there that won all 4 major championships. So it was a great experience at Houston. Was able to meet Jackie Burke, who was a big influence on me, who was a Masters champion and a PGA champion and leading money winner on the tour. And then that led to some other things. I played for a few years after college in professional golf. And then I went up and started teaching in New York at Westchester Country Club, and got and I was a head professional in the New York area. Had also as a head pro at Tamara's. I split a Quaker Ridge and Tamara's for a while. Quaker Ridge was ranked in the top 20 courses in the country when I was there. And Sleepy Hollow was my last job in New York, which is ranked in the top 100 courses now too. And then I went to, went down to Doral to start my own golf school. Started in 1991.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, that's pretty crazy. You know that this is our 73rd episode. It's a really special number because I believe you're 73 years old now, and you turned pro in 73. So you got to play the lottery this week.
and I was born in 73, so there's
there we go.
Someone who's into numerology could have fun with this.
Good point. I'll try and figure out what I can do with this information.
but I was telling you before we got on the cast, this is my 24th season coaching and instructing, and it's a real thrill to have you on. I carried around your 8-step book for a number of years in the early 2000s. I believe that came out in the late 90s. And I don't know where to start, because going back to who you looked up to, would that be Ben Hogan?
Yeah, Ben Hogan for sure. I was lucky also to work. Well, Jackie Burke was a great friend of Hogan's, and also Ken Venturi, who I worked with a lot, played a lot of rounds, well over 100 rounds with Ken Venturi. He was trained by Byron Nelson and Hogan. So he was a huge Hogan, loved Hogan. He wore the Hogan cap when he played. He won the US Open. And then he was 35 years with the lead announcer role at CBS Golf. So he worked with a lot of tour players when I was working with him as a younger guy. And then we just had a long friendship. He passed away few years ago, but Venturi was a big influence. Claude Harmon up in Wingfoot. When I was in New York, I started at Westchester Country Club in very close to Wingfoot. And, so we just had a lot of tremendous people that I had a chance to learn under, which I really enjoyed doing. I didn't know I was going to love teaching. I was completely focused on playing. Pretty disappointed. I missed the tour school in 1974, and I went up to work up there and started teaching, and I sort of immediately liked it.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to ask you about was, how did, because you're such an accomplished player at an amateur level and professional. And so, how the transition to teaching happened. And like, do you miss not like maybe grinding it out or trying, a couple more attempts at Q school? Because it is a grind.
It is a grind. I went back in 1977 and I played pretty well there, but I missed. And I never really looked back after that. I really was pretty burned out as a kid. I played so much golf, and it was depressing missing that tour school. And when I went to New York and kind of got away from getting up and worry about how many hours I was going to practice and what I was going to shoot the next day, it was a big relief for me. So it just was something I fell into with this teaching, and I had a great interest in it right from the beginning.
Well, you got to have an analytical mind, and I'm pretty excited to talk about the fact that you've actually worked with about 250 professionals who went on to work at great facilities throughout the United States and the world, including eight juniors who went to #1 in America, which is unbelievable. And then, just for those of you who don't know who Jim McLean is and how many people he's taught and who he's worked with, some pros include, U.S. Open champion Christy Kerr, U.S. Open champions Gary Woodland, Curtis Strange, the infamous Greg Norman, and tons of celebrities. You're down in Miami at the Bitmore. You used to be at Doral. Tell us a couple of the players that you've worked with. And some of the celebrities, possibly. I know that you've worked with Will Smith and Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, a lot of people are drawn into golf, and this was a destination area down here. We had a PGA Tour event at Doral for 25 of the 26 years I was there. I worked a lot with Keegan Bradley from when he just came out of college for 5 years, and he won the PGA Championship. I worked a lot with Brad Faxon, Lenny Matisse, a lot, who went on to win tour events. Guys that came out of college that weren't really maybe expected to be that great. So that was fun. I worked with Lexi Thompson since she was a young girl. Lucy Lee lately, she's on the LPGA Tour.
Yeah,
so I started her. Eric Compton, who's had the 2 heart transplants. A lot of people know who Eric is, but he was runner-up in the United States Open and has played a lot of PGA Tour golf, a lot on the Corn Ferry, a lot on some over in Europe. But, Eric has been really a hero of mine because of the amount of drugs he has to take every day and how tough it is for him. But he's still been able to do these great things in golf. And he's a friend of mine down here, a very good friend. So, sometimes it's not the absolute most famous people you work with. I worked with a lot of amateurs that have done well, made the Walker Cup teams, won the U.S. Mid Amateurs. I just talked to a friend of mine. He owns Friar's Head now in the United States, which is I think ranked 6th in the United States, the golf course. He built that place with Crenshaw and Core. But he qualified for the Masters by winning the Mid Amateurs. So those are fun things that happen besides a lot of tour players that I've worked with.
Is there a player that stands out that would like fit into the rags to riches story, right? Because a lot of golfers are, may come from, or the rumor are that they come from affluent families, but you always hear of that one player who slept in the car and, and whatnot. Is there anyone in your roster that fits that description?
Well, absolutely. Keegan Bradley came with a Ford Focus car with the mirrors taped to the side of his car. He had absolutely
I love it.
Yeah,
love it.
He had no money. I'm telling you, no money. He was playing the Hooters tour up in Orlando when I met him. He'd come out of college. He was 22 years old, but he never played in the U.S. Junior or the U.S. Amateur or any no big amateur events in America. He was a really good athlete, though, a good skier, strong, and he wanted to play the tour. So we started working, and he gradually, came up, got onto it was the web.com. It's the Corn Ferry Tour now. And then he got it, made it to the PGA Tour. I was with him in Texas when he won his first tour event, the Byron Nelson, as a rookie. And then later that year, he won the PGA. So
amazing.
I know people are talking, it would be a travesty if Brooks Koepka didn't make it to the Ryder Cup this year, because they're PGA champions automatic, but they didn't pick Keegan when he won the, and he won a tour event year too. And he was way at the top of the list, but they picked some other people ahead of him because he didn't quite get to the total exempt pick.
Jim,
He's a scrappy player. I think he would have done well in that format.
Yeah.
Jim, I got to tell you, I'm glad you brought up Keegan Bradley. And Mike, what a fantastic question. Leading into the fact that as a golf instructor, it drives me bananas to see his posture. Now, you mentioned, I used to always joke around with other pros saying, the guy looks like he's going to go skiing, only to find out that afterwards that posture comes from downhill skiing. Isn't that right?
That's exactly right. And Keegan's he's got really long arms, and he'd always played with those clubs. So, that was one of the first things I looked at, but we had bigger fish to fry with his golf swing really at the beginning. And then he just stayed with that. I've seen some guys with deep knee flex who are, very, very fine players. So that, that was just part of his physiology.
Yeah. And if I look at someone like Victor Hovland, who also has long arms, it's really interesting on how he swings the club and comes around everything. But you've taught some of the great champions of the game and spent time with Gary Player, Bernard Longer, Tom Kite, Ben Crenshaw. I've got to mention these names because they're not just your average golfer, right? It's pretty incredible. When we talk about celebrities, one thing we like to talk about are funny and embarrassing stories. Do you got any stories with any of these celebrities that you've had to teach? Anything that comes to mind, or the first thing that pops into your head when you think of the celebrities learning how to play?
Well, I taught Sylvester Stallone quite a bit, and he would come to Doral with a couple of bodyguards, actually, because and we went up, the first time I went into Doral with him we went into the clubhouse. It's a pretty big resort. There's a big restaurant there. We're going to get something to eat. And I don't know, about 15 or 20 people started yelling, "Yo, Rocky," pretty loud, so they did the whole Rocky deal, which was pretty cool. And I was fun talking to him about how he produced Rocky and then starred in it, because he had that script for quite a few years, so nobody would take it. And when they finally did take it, they refused to have him be the lead role. But he said, I wrote this play for myself. And it was a very low budget film. And of course, we know what's happened, how he did okay on that deal.
Yeah, not
he
too
did.
bad.
And didn't he have to? He sold a dog or something during that time to help get some money.
Speaking
and
of
he went
rags
back
to
and
riches,
bought it back. Gave the guy a handsome profit to readopt the dog. I believe was attached to that film.
I think that's correct. I think that's right. But Sly became a good golfer. He got a good golf swing. I found that the actors I've worked with are very good students, because actors are used to listening to the director. They follow a script. So they've actually been some of the easiest people I've ever worked with in my life.
Interesting. I've heard that if anyone on set made eye contact with Sly, they were out. So I don't know if that held true on the driving range. So
no,
it's Is Alice Cooper a good a golfer as people say he was or is?
He's an avid golfer. He's loves it. I was lucky to have him on my team a couple times in the Michael Douglas tournament that Michael ran. And we gambled a little. Well, he didn't actually gamble. He came down with me at Caesars when we played in Vegas. But he was fantastic to listen to. I mean, so entertaining. Completely no drinking anymore, no drugs, no nothing. Yeah. He was definitely in the serious fast lane there for quite a while.
Yeah, that came with the territory in those days. The rocker lifestyle.
I worked with Glenn Fry some too, and he
Wow.
had great stories with the Eagles of what it was like in the, and then of course when I knew him, he was a different person. He wasn't drinking, and he was great. He was really fun to talk to as well.
Yeah. That's
Jim, I gotta bring this up. I want to pivot a little bit. Lots
Yep.
going on in the world of golf. Obviously, the U.S. Open coming up. We're going to get to that in a moment. But Brandel Chambly is in the news quite a bit. Your relationship with him, your thoughts on Brandel, and maybe a little bit of live talk. You don't have to tell us anything, but do you have an opinion?
Well, I broadcast. I'm going to Los Angeles for the LA Open coming up. So we do PGA Tour radio for SiriusXM,
That's
and
right.
this will be US Open radio. So I'm excited to see all those guys from Live playing in the event. I think it was great at Augusta. When everybody was together, it seemed like everybody got along. To me, I do the range at the majors, so it seemed to me everybody got along really well. And then for Brooks to finish second at the Masters and then win at the PGA, it's really, you kind of like to supplant the Ryder Cup with Live versus the PGA Tour. Would be I think a lot of people would watch that. It's super controversial, so it really touches a nerve with a lot of people talking about the LIV. It'd be a tough decision probably for somebody to turn down that kind of money and the schedule they have. I've had my school at Mayakoba in Mexico for a long time, and I went down this year. They had the PGA Tour event for 14 straight years, and they had LIV this year, and it was really cool. I mean, the tournament was really fun, and the sponsors enjoyed it. I know that.
Yeah. I was down at the event at Pumpkin Ridge because it was just a short drive from where I am, and so I went down and got to walk around, and I thought the event was fairly fun. It's condensed into a few hours, and there's a lot of interactivity around. And I know each event they've been evolving slightly and getting better. That was only the second event on their schedule, but I was surprised that I actually found it enjoyable to watch. And there was a great crowd on the final day. The place was just as busy as any other tour event. But like you just said, I miss seeing them on tour. So when they all showed up at Augusta, so that was fantastic because I miss DJ, all these guys in the field, and even Poulter and some of the older fellows, Louis Oosthuizen. Like we miss seeing these guys in the majors. So whatever one's opinion is.
Yeah, we've got a British Open champion and a PGA champion right now. They're on the LIV, they've won 3 of the last 4 majors. So I think when they all get together, that's a world championship golf tournament, when you've got everybody in the world there. Now with LIV, I don't know if they end up making some changes to, going to 72 holes, or if there's some way they get world ranking points. Those are all very controversial in the golf world for sure. So, some people go, absolutely ballistic, and other people are accepting. But mainly I like to watch golf. I like to see the best players in the world.
It's nice to hear you say that, because Raf and I felt the same way, right? Like obviously the disruption, I would have liked to seen how all of that, the announcement and how Jay handled things, but I would have liked to seen that be a bit smoother. But at the end of the day, it's golf. It's a different format, and there's a lot of golf going on right now. So it's interesting to see it unfold.
Yeah, we're pretty thrilled. We got a lot of good guests. We've been fortunate to have most of the old Golf Channel crew come on, a lot of the Champions Tour players, and some of them like to answer the questions. Some of them give their opinions. They feel strongly about their allegiance to the PGA Tour. Others just love golf. And that's where Mike and I stand. We're sort of in the middle. We love the game. We're going to promote it on both ends. And, it's really about the players at the end of the day, because no tour is bigger than golf, in our opinion. Well, I'm going to jump on to, the current players. Do you have a few players in the stable right now? And the second part of the question, any US Open picks, any favorites?
Yeah, well, right now I'm pretty much just teaching at the golf school. We've been since COVID. I worked. The last person I really worked with was was Russell Henley for a year in 2020, which was really great. He's a great guy, and he finally won again this past year, and he's playing great golf. So I'll look forward to seeing him out there. Going to this U.S. Open picks. Is that what we just did?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, geez, you just watch Scotty Scheffler, at Muirfield hit the ball better than anyone's probably hit it ever in a PGA Tour event, to be that far ahead in strokes gained. He's right at the top of the list. John Rahm's going to be really tough. So you kind of look also at the California guys, although Morikawa just withdrew with a back injury. So that really looks bad for him. Max Homa hasn't had a top 10 finish, but he's an LA guy and he's played great. I think Victor Hovland, such a great striker. I think LA Country Club, I played it quite a few times. I think it's going to be very tough. I think all opens are very tough, but it's really stretched out a long ways, and it's going to be a heck of a test. I think it's going to be really something. So it's all, the guys you expect to be up there are probably my top picks off the top of my head.
I think all
Nice.
Sound picks. I might
I
add
know one.
Koepka.
I know one I was going to pick. I think Ricky Fowler's playing really well again right now.
He is trending. Absolutely. That would be a great Sunday to see him hoist.
It's nice
the
to see
trophy.
him. Nice to see him back with Butch, working on his game. He's got a pretty flat swing. He's not a very tall player, and he gets through the ball really well with an amazing amount of speed. That's a really good pick. I like that.
Well, he'd be a crowd favorite. Yeah, how cool would that it would be to see him hoist the U.S. Open trophy? I think that would be a great experience.
So, Jim, you're currently at the Bitmore. Tell us about your golf school and what you're offering at that location, and how people could get in touch with you.
Well, the Biltmore Hotel. It's in Coral Gables, right next to the University of Miami. Very close to downtown Miami. I also have another school at Miami Beach Golf Club in South Beach. So we have two schools down here. They've done great. We're going into our slower season right now, where we're doing a ton of junior teaching. I'm going out to my school in Utah, just outside of Park City, Utah, called Red Ledges at Jack Nicklaus Golf Course. A beautiful place. So I'm going to go out that way. I'm speaking later in this fall in Paris to the French Federation, and in Madrid to the Spanish Federation in the fall. So I got a pretty busy time starting in about the end of July.
Is there any of your locations like stand out to you as a favorite? Is it you're pretty got a global presence right now?
Well, I talked to my guy in Korea. I'm going to go to Korea next year. Not going to make it this year, but I was supposed to go when COVID hit. But now I think I'll go next year. The place at Banco Santander in Madrid is fabulous. Mayakoba is a phenomenal resort. But I'm stationed right here in Miami at the Biltmore. They've been great to me. We have a really cool facility there with a good short game area. Awesome. The super stations in the back, and they're all good. I think all the places are really nice. Yeah.
Anything with a great short game area, it's just a favorite to me, just because I can get absorbed in the short game area for hours. So that's fantastic. Now, one thing that stood out to me was that you're kind of pioneering the use of radar technology in terms of the golf application, and you're involved with the Trackman. Is that correct? And getting that started, can give us a little more insight on how that came about.
Well, I think the main thing that for me was getting started with video right at the very beginning. With a really the greatest guy in golf research, Carl Welty, down in Carlsbad at La Costa, who I knew from Seattle, Washington. I started with Trackman right at the beginning because I owned the club fitting also at Doral when I was there. But we used it for club fitting really at the beginning. That's what it was actually for mostly. And then, it became a big deal in teaching. And obviously you go through all the programs and learn all the terminology and how to read all the parameters. I've got Foresight now, which has been great because it's so easy to take out on the golf course. I see it's kind of evenly divided now when I go to a tour event between Trackman and Foresight. Those are the two huge players right now in launch monitors for tour players. But the ability to show the numbers to people, I feel like, my eyes have been the Trackman my whole life. I was looking at spin rates and everything that's happening in the swing. But I think the great thing is when you can show those numbers to the person you're working with of how much outside in they're swinging or inside out they're swinging. And, when you show them those numbers, they just can't deny it. They said, well, yeah, I guess I am swinging that much outside in. Because maybe they were 10 or 15 degrees to the left. And then they say, well, I made a big change. I said, yeah, but you're still 5 degrees outside in. And they look at those numbers. They say, yeah, I guess I am.
Jim, I found it helped. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I found it helped on the amateur side, you guys both being teaching pros. I found it helped sort of visualize a feeling. So then you could try something else, and it's amazing how it's easy to correct yourself when you see the faults.
I was getting into teaching right on the precipice of all this technology coming out. So we're learning on a full swing golf simulator and having that Doppler technology. And then you had the Sam Putt Lab come out, early mid 2000s. And I'm currently using the GC Hawk Foresight technology. And like you said, you get all your distances, and not only for total distance, but the spin rates and the carry distance and everything from inside out to outside in. It really gives a lot of the players a good visual. And it's not just for professionals, it's really good for beginners too. And obviously the V1 technology through video and just drawing out things simply down the line and face front is incredible. And, you really pioneered that. Did you ever get somebody like Donald Trump on some of this technology or?
Yeah, yes, I did. And a few others, but going back to the computer technology, I started with doing that with Tom Peters was his name, and then it became Swing Solutions. This is way back, and we brought that to the golf show, and nobody was really that interested. It was kind of a little bit ahead of its time, and then Solutions came out, and then JC Video and V1. So what Carl and I had done in the old days, we used 2 televisions and we put 2 VHS tapes in, and we drew on the TV to like you do with the computer now. And that's how I showed Tom Peters how to do the software going back in the 80s. Before, right. And I also worked with V1, and that's why you see there's all of these different systems have 8 steps in them. If you might notice that. Yeah. And it's got
this is amazing.
It's got the safety zone in there. I did that.
You're like the godfather of golf instructions.
No. There's a lot of great teachers that came before me. I learned a lot from a lot of great people.
But like you said, it's more you kind of learned it. You kind of dug it out of the dirt back in the day. You kind of learn by practicing and visually seeing, and other players or who turned into teachers telling you what you're doing wrong. But having that feeling and being able to back it up with the numbers and technology was really where you were and how you pushed that forward. So that's very cool.
So do you think the amateurs or even budding professionals, like we should all be, scrambling to get, some of the small launch monitors or just some kind of regular data as we practice?
Well, there is more affordable technology that's pretty good right now. I think it's fun for everybody to maximize their time. A big thing for me as a teacher has been trying to be able to teach amateur golfers a reasonable amount of time for them, because I think a lot of teachers overestimate how much an amateur golfer is really going to practice. So I've always tried to narrow it down to just a few minutes a day, or a few minutes. A few minutes a day would be 1 or 2 minutes a day, and then a few times a week practicing. They can just keep their mind on it. But if you go to the range and you have some technology to dial in your real distances, because as we know, everybody way overestimates how far they hit their iron shots.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that would be a very advisable thing to do.
There we have it.
Recently talked to Len Matisse, who's mentioned he was going out to see you, I think, before one of the events this year. Or was that last year, Mike? I don't remember. We had him on twice
He's
in the
been
last
on
year
a
and a
couple
half.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was great to talk to him. Tell us a little bit about Len and your relationship with him.
Yeah, well, Lenny and I still have a great relationship. I started working with him, and he just kept getting better and better. And he won twice. He won at LA, and he won in Memphis. The FedEx tournament at the time was not the FedEx Championship, but it was a big tour. It was a good tour event. And then the next year, I was with him at Augusta, and he shot 65 the last day. And then one of your guys, by the way, Mike Weir, in a playoff, which was big. And then that very winter, he was in a terrible skiing accident. I don't know if he mentioned that to you, because he didn't talk about it. But I mean, that just took out all the ligaments in both knees. And it was a devastating, really career-ending accident for Lenny, where you couldn't really get back to being a world-class player with that kind of damage to your legs.
No, it was a real shame, because he was trending during the 2003 season in that gap of 2 years. So it's real unfortunate turn of events there. It's too major injury to recover from effectively. But it's good to see him out there on Champions Tour and making a go at it still.
Yeah, well, nobody works harder than Lenny. He's got an indomitable spirit. He's just one of the greatest guys ever. And he just loves golf. And there's a lot of great things he does with his foundation. Yeah. He's good friends with so many of the top players. He was, in those years, he was in those big groups. He played with Tiger a lot, and Goosen and VJ and all that stuff. So, he was, like you said, he was trending. He was, working his way into the top 20 in the world. And, things happen in life, though. There's anything
100%. No, that's exactly. What about Greg Norman? Are you in touch with Greg? Have you, especially since all this live stuff is broken down, or
just
any communication?
A little bit, a couple text messages. I haven't talked to him on the phone. I didn't see him at Mayakoba. I had fun working with him, though. One of the things watching this tournament last week, with McIlroy driving the balls so far and straight, and then missing greens with wedges and hitting those terrible wedge shots. Greg was a little bit like that too. The guys that fully released the golf club with a tremendous amount of speed, like both of those guys do. Also Jack Nicklaus. They were notoriously poor wedge players as compared to a tour player. So it's a different release. So Hovland's got the opposite release, a hang on, hold on release, going through it more like Trevino or Zach Johnson, great wedge players, Paul Azinger, somebody like that. And he's a complete let go releasing, which launches the balls very high, like Greg did with the wedges. And you got to bring that wedge trajectory down to be a great wedge player. And it's hard to do, though. I mean, when you're driving at 350 yards and then trying to ratchet it down. But it was kind of sad to see him missing greens and hitting it over greens with from inside of 120 yards.
Yeah, you look at different players. Jordan Spieth as well. Looks like he's holding it off a little bit. He's changed his swing, even his pre-shot routine, a little bit over the top, and he's trying to push and get to play that power fade. But like you mentioned, when you release the club, they're all great drivers of the game. Rory's been the longest. Greg in his day was the longest on tour and the straightest. So that's a very good point. I'd like to talk about your game. Because in 1973, although I was not born yet, I'm a 74 child. In 73, I have watched almost everything back in the archives. And I believe that year you did finished 43rd. That was the year Tommy Aaron, with his only major win, won at 36 years old. You had Johnny Miller.
1972, Nicklaus won. I was there. It was 1972, and for the Masters.
Great.
Yeah.
So now I've got my years mixed up. It
That's
was a while
okay.
ago.
But so long ago, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So tell us, do you remember how it all led up to you going and driving down Magnolia Lane and how that felt?
Well, that came from the U.S. Amateur. I finished 4th in the U.S. Amateur, and that got you into the Masters. So it was great. I stayed up in the Crow's Nest. Ben Crenshaw stayed up there 1 or 2 nights. Tom Kite, Jim Simons was a really good friend of mine, was up there too, and they all ended up being very good, great tour players, of course. And Tom and Ben are Hall of Famers, and we all 4 of us made the cut, which was I don't know how many times that's ever happened. Might be the only time that's ever happened. Not sure, but I played the first round with Al Geiberger, who was the PGA champion. I played the second round with Hale Irwin. Every day they changed. We played a twosome. They repaired after the first round. Hale Irwin didn't say one word to me before, during, or after the round. I played with Hubert Green the third round, who won 3 majors, and he was the greatest.
Yeah. Is
Anyway.
there any of these golf personalities that like were more comedic? Like, who's the most comedic person, like past and present, perhaps?
Of tour players or anybody?
Of tour players that you've been across,
There's
either
a lot
students or.
There's no doubt. Lee Trevino, no doubt, was a character.
Oh yeah,
Chichi Rodriguez.
Chichi was great. I played a little bit with Chichi one time with Chichi. I had dinner with Bob Toski last night, actually, and Toski's 96. He got up and sang a few songs at the piano with the guy singing up there, and he was great. He was talking about the old timers who were a different breed, of course. There was much more party atmosphere, but Trevino, I'd say, hilarious. I think Max Homa right now has got a great sense of humor. I don't really know.
Absolutely.
And most of the guys are pretty sharp-witted guys and can really throw the barbs out. I think that, I don't really know who's the most hilarious guy right now.
Well, and you mentioned some of the, they were called the old schoolers, right? I remember Ken Venturi telling a story about getting on a plane with Frank Sinatra. I think from the West Coast, they flew to New York and partied for days and came back. And, so those days, are remain in the history. And I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the live might be the closest thing to the clam bake, right? It's a good different party atmosphere.
That sweet jet they fly around on. So they're really taking care of these guys. Now anyway, we'll see if that changes.
And the first tee times at 1:30. I mean, they'll tee off at 1:30, so that leaves you a lot of room for the evening deal. But on the PGA Tour, there's a lot of 7 a.m. tee times, either Thursday or Friday, no matter who you are, and rainouts and all. It's a little tougher than I think most people might think of how early the guys are. I mean, I don't think anybody's feeling sorry for them right now, but it's very tough to get onto that PGA Tour, and a lot of guys struggle. Like Max Homa would be an example. He didn't really get out there until he was 30. But he hung in there through all those different tours, and one of the great feeder tours, of course, is the Canadian PGA Tour. My son played there for 4 years. I played the Canadian Tour. It was a long time ago when I was younger, but
my mentor in the professional golf management program when I got started in the late 90s was Bob Boschman, who played on tour, and he was the commissioner of the Canadian Tour and got it started basically. He just got inducted in the Ontario Golf Hall of Fame. So that's really neat. Jim, I don't even know where to take this interview because we could go so many different ways. You got so many great stories. I'd love for us to find out what your ultimate foursome would be. We're talking about, 5 generations, 5 decades of golf. I was going to say generations, my goodness, decades of golf. Who would you love to play with, dead or alive, excluding family? Because everybody always mentions family, but excluding family. What's your ultimate foursome?
Of golf pros or anybody?
It could be
True.
anybody. Anybody, dead
Well-
or alive. First people will pop into your head.
Bill Murray stopped by a couple weeks ago. I played with him. He is unbelievable. He's a lot of fun to play with. I would say Arnold Palmer would be one.
Mhm.
I would put in my group, and Tiger Woods
Yeah.
and
That
Bill
would be a
Murray.
great foursome.
And Bill Murray. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like Arnold be the mediator between, somebody who's highly competitive and then Bill Murray on the far left.
I was supposed to play with Arnold when I qualified for the United States Senior Open. I talked to him. Arnold was one of the guys that hired me at the Golf Channel when the Golf Channel started, and I worked for the Golf Channel for 10 years. But I was supposed to play with him. We arranged a game. I called him, maybe 10 days before the tournament, and he said, "Yeah, we can play at 8:00 on Wednesday." I said, "Okay, great." So I practiced morning till night on Monday and Tuesday, getting ready for this Arnold Palmer day. And he didn't show up at 8:00. I waited till 9:30. I finally went out, played up with some other people. I just said, "Well, you just forgot about it, or maybe didn't feel well." Then I saw him later that night, and he said, "Where were you?" And I said, "Arnold, I was there at 6. I was the first one at the course." And he said, "Well, our tee time was at 11. And I said,
Oh,
so there's no way I forgot what time I was playing with Arnold, but what am I going to say, right?
right, exactly.
Yeah, you're right, Arnold. I guess I just messed up,
Yeah.
But that was my chance to play. The one time I did have a chance to play with him.
That's a great, thank you for sharing all your stories. If you're just tuning in and you're wondering who we're with Jim McLean. He's basically one of the golf gurus in the game. I love the fact that you mentioned the Golf Channel because, Mike and I, were we roommates back then, late 90s, Mike? We've known each other for almost 30 years.
Almost 30
Mike
years.
rekindled my game back in the early 90s, getting me back out on the golf course because I was played a lot of golf when I was a kid. And so we used to watch Jim Flick, who used to have one of the first academies on the Golf Channel.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to have these students behind podiums, right? Do you remember?
He was promoting the swing guide back then too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I remember that. I actually have one still sitting around somewhere.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us, Mike. Do you want to sign us off with your final question?
Yeah,
and
thanks anyone watching. Thank you. Please hit subscribe. And tomorrow this will be out on all the different platforms wherever you get your podcasts. So catch it there. And thanks again. And Jim, really appreciate your time coming to spend nearly an hour with us. And I think our followers and supporters are going to enjoy this pod as much as we did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The time went really fast, Mike and Rafael. Thanks for having me on. I hope you guys will stop down in Miami and see me next winter.
That we will 100%. Raf and I are actually
I'll
anxiously wanting to get down to Florida. so we'll come knocking on your door. So
all right.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
For Jim and Michael, I'm Rafael. We'll see you next week with John